Welcome and thank you for joining this webinar on the newly announced HPE VM Essentials software. I'm Shannon Wilson, HPE Private Cloud and Block Storage Business Manager here at HPE, and I'm joined by my esteemed colleague Sam Draper, Senior Solution Architect. Today, we'll be covering off an overview into VM Essentials software, followed by the availability to purchase VM Essentials software and the addition of the trial license for customers to use. And then Sam will take you through a technical deep dive and a demo into the solution, followed by a Q&A. Hopefully you can see that the Q&A is enabled in the webinar today, so any questions, please do pop them in there and Sam and I will come to answer them at the end of the call. So given the many changes to the virtualization market over the past 18 months to 2 years, organizations are looking at, different alternatives as well. We've seen a huge increase from 3 to 5 times costs for customers due to vendor lock-in, forced bundling, being able to buy additional features that you don't necessarily need, and also a VM sprawl within different customer environments where you might not have visibility into absolutely everything that is running across the infrastructure today. This then means that customers are forced into making new strategic plans. You need to look at supporting existing workloads, looking at new workloads that might come, and maybe factoring in additional virtualization, containerization, bare metal capabilities as well, and how do you simplify the management of that? And that leads to a lot of complexity for our customers today. A lot of our customers are saying along these lines of that, they need to take time to look at the strategy, figure out exactly what they want to do, and it can take a lot of time. So what HPE wants to do is help support in that communication with customers by offering a future-proof strategy and platform that helps go beyond just the virtualization layer today. The first step we want to help customers with is how to optimize the current investments that they've made with their technology, reducing your existing VM license spend, looking into are you over provisioned today? Are you utilizing your resources correctly with the virtualization environment with VMware today? But we also want to help customers modernize their strategy. So being able to, look at your legacy apps running along, multi-cloud and hybrid cloud, but keeping that management simplified and through a single interface as well. And then finally, how do you keep that simple with the, a lot of skills gap as well, education, manual work, and end-to-end, automation is really required for a lot of customers to help accelerate the kind of cloud operating model and adoption today. So how can we help customers free up the resources, focus on your workloads, and make sure you get the workload in the right place, whether that's on premise or within the public cloud as well. So from an optimized perspective, if you haven't used or heard of Cloud Physics before, Cloud Physics is an insight tool and an analytics tool that runs across your virtualized environment today and pulls lots of insights into what you're doing across the virtualization stack. So it can look into your VMware environment and see whether or not you're utilizing best practices with your with your VMs today. So are you over provisioned from a CPU perspective and underutilized on your virtual RAM as well, and how it can make recommendations to help reduce costs. It collects data insights within 15 minutes of deployment, so you can get a really nice accurate view into exactly what's going on in your environment. And then we recommend running an assessment like this for 7 days so that we can see any kind of peaks in the environment, whether you have a little spike when you do a backup on a every midnight, for example, so that we can optimize and help with your environment today to help reduce costs. Cloud physics is, like I say, the first step that we would take for helping customers optimize with their existing environment. So working with your direct account team here at HPE or with your preferred channel partner, they are able to, provide a cloud physics solution for you free of charge to help look at your existing environment. The second step that HPE wants to help optimize customers with is looking at the correct VMware bundle for your existing needs. If your VMware renewals are coming up and it's a little bit late to maybe look at alternative hypervisors in the market, then, we want to have a consultative conversation with you around, do we really need to go for the VMware Cloud Foundation option, or can you reduce down to vSphere Foundation, which can give you, multiple different functionalities within there as well. And that can help you save up to 60% as well, given the the increase in prices compared to VMware Cloud Foundation and vSphere Foundation. And then lastly, looking at new solutions to help minimize the licenses that you would require from a core count. So looking at Electra MP B10000 storage, where you can scale your compute independently from your storage with a private cloud business edition option. And with that, if you need more capacity, you can just add storage without impacting your CPU licenses as well too. At Discover last year in Vegas back in June, we announced that HPE would be entering the virtualization market by offering a virtualization hypervisor from within our private cloud solutions. Now, that was going to be only for our private cloud business edition option, but given the feedback that we heard from customers and partners alike, was that they would like it to be extended to not only HPE free tier solutions, but also to integrate with third parties as well. So at Discover back in November, late last year, we announced that we acquired a company called Morpheus Data in August. And what we've done with Morpheus is taken an element of their portfolio, so the virtualization piece, which is based off of KVM, and we have named our hypervisor VM Essentials, which will run across both a private cloud perspective and also a standalone perspective with ProLiant, and later down the year with integrations with third parties as well. So a little bit more on VM Essentials. As I mentioned, it came from the Morpheus acquisition that we did back in August. Now, Morpheus, if you've not heard of Morpheus Data, is a hybrid cloud, multi-cloud management capability that does everything across virtualization, containers, bare metal, and uses things like Terraform, Ansible, FinOps, governance as well, that gives customers a real true management and insight into their environment wherever their workloads may sit. Now, as part of that acquisition, they also ran a hypervisor internally called Morpheus Virtual Machine, which had been running for over 4 years and had run hundreds of virtual machines there. Now, it's based on KVM, so similar to other hypervisor alternatives in the market, using long-founded technologies. KVM's been around for a really long time and packaged up into a solution. So instead of creating our own 1.0 hypervisor, we took the capabilities from the great foundations that Morpheus had provided and delivered HPE VM Essentials. So HPE VM Essentials is actually already on its 8.0.2 release. So for customers who might be a little bit wary that it's a 1.0, it's been running for a number of years. Come on to trial license capabilities for customers to get familiar with the solution as well. What the hypervisor also does is it offers simplified management across both your VMware and HPE VME environment as well. So within the VME manager, very similar to vCenter, it has an on-premise console, and within the on-premise console, you can brownfield in your vSphere environment and manage all of your HPE virtual machines and VMware virtual machines, all from a single interface. It does an automatic refresh with vCenter every 5 minutes. So any changes that you make within the VME console will be reflected within vCenter as well. And then from a future-proof standpoint as well, if you start with VM Essentials and realize you need additional functionality such as multi-cloud integration, more hypervisor integration in addition to VMware and VME, and maybe looking at containers, for example, we have a seamless upgrade path to use full Morpheus platform ops, which would be as a comparable to VMware Cloud Foundation as well. So given that we announced VME a few months ago, we've made some really good enhancements with where we're supporting from a portfolio perspective. So today, HPE VME supports Gen 11 ProLiant servers, Gen 10 Plus ProLiant servers, Alletra MP B10000 storage, and our Alletra 5000 and 6000 arrays as well. More integration for the HPE portfolio will come throughout FY25, and then later towards the back end of 2025, early 2026, we'll start to see integrations with third-party vendors as well for customers that want to use this software on other vendors' hardware as well. Today, Ubuntu is the operating system that is a prerequisite for customers to deploy VM Essentials. HPE will be offering level 1 and level 2 support for VM Essentials, and any customer, and we have an agreement with Canonical as well to help support. But if customers want to purchase additional support for the Ubuntu operating system, then they can work directly with Canonical as well. On the right-hand side, I won't steal Sam's thunder as he will be showcasing exactly what the platform looks like and how you can do the management, but that's the view of the console as well. So it will be sold as 2 separate offerings, as mentioned, standalone and also embedded with our private cloud solutions as well. From a private cloud business edition solution, so more of a HCI approach, similar to other alternatives in the market as well. So you would do your lifecycle management and your setup and manage your hardware all from within our GreenLake platform. And then from a hypervisor perspective with VME, you will use the on-premise console to do the management there. You can set up the nodes and connect to our Alletra storage solutions today. How this works with an existing vSphere cluster is you will have your VME cluster and then your vSphere cluster as well. So you would have separate nodes, but what you can do as customers is utilize the same storage solution as well. So really nice and seamless integration with VME, and you can see the integration with vCenter as well, which enables customers to manage from a seamless single interface within VM Essentials today. For our Alletra MP B10000 storage, if you're unfamiliar with our storage solutions, it's an industry-first disaggregated scale-out storage platform, which kind of frees from legacy infrastructure limitations. So a unified cloud experience for the management of the storage array, all from the GreenLake platform. And this also integrates with our private cloud business edition solution. You can scale the storage independently of the performance as well. So if you need to add more capacity, we can do that really granularly, but with 2 drive increments as well. So it can start small from 15 terabytes and scale all the way up to 5.8 petabytes of storage. From a feature perspective with HPE VM Essentials, I know Sam will showcase more of these throughout the demo, but just from a brief overview, as you can see, we do have a number of items that are still on the roadmap for VM Essentials, which are all due to be added within 2025. Given that Morpheus was using this as their own internal hypervisor rather than it being a market offering, there are some gaps in comparison to VMware vSphere today. But we do have some really good core functionality such as high availability, distributed resource scheduler, and live migration between the hosts as well. And Sam will showcase some of those capabilities in the demonstration. As you can see, we've got integrations with third-party backups on the roadmap, so Veeam, Commvault, and Cohesity. Today, you can do agent-based backups, and very shortly, we're waiting for the validations just on the third-party side for the integration for agentless-based backups as well, which will all be coming very shortly. I just want to focus on as well in terms of pricing. So this is price per CPU compared to other offerings in the market which are priced per core. So moving on to the licensing model. So we will have VM Essentials from a standalone perspective available on a 1-year, 3-year, and 5-year solution. That is available to quote and buy today. So work with your aligned channel partner or your HPE account team to get a quote for your existing environment or new environment today. So how we differ from other virtualization solutions that are available on the market is that we are priced per CPU. So regardless of the number of cores that your environment has, you require one license per CPU rather than the core based as well. So that can help customers save up to 86% compared to other leading hypervisors within the market today. As I mentioned previously, there is a software trial available for our customers to get access to. You can do this as a nested virtualization approach. So on your existing solutions today, if you want to spin up an Ubuntu virtual machine and deploy the VME manager, you're able to do that for this trial. And then from a production workload, on our supported solutions today as well. The trial is for 6-socket environment and will last for 60 days as well. So you can go directly to hpe.com and search for VM Essentials to access your trial. Or if you would like to work with your HPE account team or channel partner or preferred channel partner, then please do reach out and we will help support in getting you set up on a trial license as well. I'm going to hand it over now to my colleague Sam, who's going to walk you through the logical architecture of HPE VME and then take you for a demo. Thank you, Sam.
Perfect. Thank you, Shannon. So I'm Sam Draper. I'm a storage technical architect at HPE. And before I jump into the demo, I just want to run you through the logical architecture of, say, a single node VM Essentials deployment. So it should start with the Gen 11 server, though, as Shannon mentioned, we have qualified some Gen 10 plus servers as well. Then Ubuntu is on top, followed by, once you've downloaded the folder from the My Software Center, you'll have 2 different packages. One of those packages will deploy the VM Essentials agent, KVM, QEMU, libvirt, and OpenSwitch, as well as the pacemaker cluster service that we use for high availability and clustering. Once all of that's deployed, you'll be able to continue on and deploy the manager, which in this environment you can just think of as our vCenter. Now that's typically deployed on the local disks of the server that you're setting up first, but that can be moved post-deployment onto shared storage like Electra MP, the B10000, so it's highly available and on mission critical storage. So on the right is what a single node would look like. You'd have the ProLiant Gen 11, Ubuntu, VM Essentials agent, all of these long-standing, field-tested, open-source components that we've brought together to make this offering. And then the manager, which again, single appliance-based virtual machine that you'll use to manage the entire cluster. Okay. While I move you over to the demo, a word on storage. So I mentioned that you can combine this with a B10000, and that's over iSCSI. We validated that in our lab. But it can also be combined with NFS storage as well. though the validation work that we've completed internally is still in the works. It's a bit of a blood is thicker than water approach. We've got to look after our own portfolio first, but we do want to open this up to the market, and that will come in due course. So just going to snap this into full screen. And then Shannon, if you could be the one to let me know that this is pulling through.
We've got it, Sam. Thank you.
Fantastic. Okay, so I've already logged into the console, and you'll be very happy to hear, or some dark side customers I think will be very happy to hear, that this is run entirely on-prem. Okay, so if you are a secure site with no outbound connectivity, no internet connection, then you can still take advantage of VME. Now, I've logged in using my local credentials. However, you could have logged in with your preferred authentication provider. So we support AD, other SAML 2.0 compliant vendors, including Okta. And you can even choose to enable two-factor authentication and bring in something like Google Authenticator as your authenticator, so that there is 2FA for everybody that logs in. Okay. Now, when you log in, you'll be greeted by a dashboard. And the intent of this page is just to show you the overall health and status of the system. I can see how many groups as a user that I have access to. And if you haven't worked with Morpheus before, or you're not familiar with the groups concept, groups is a logical construct. And we use it to define scope-based access to resources inside of the environment. So I may create a group that I'll assign to a role, and that role will be given to a user. And with those permissions, they can interface with the VME environment, but not the vCenter, or only the vCenter and not the VME, or I'll create a cloud that has both, or two separate clouds and give them access to both of those. A lot of people think about all the things that they would lose moving from, a hypervisor that's been available in the market for multiple decades. But there are actually things to gain too. I mean, this level of scope-based access isn't available in standard editions of some of the market-leading hypervisors, but it's here in this release of the product. So again, overall health of the system, but let's go into what you've came to see, which is some provisioning, some interaction. And I don't think this would be a very good VME demo if I didn't at least lead with deploying an instance into the VME environment. So here I can see two different clouds, and we just term, if you have a cluster that's VME and a cluster that's VMware, we'll term it as a cloud. So I'll select the VME cloud and click Next. Now, as default, I'm going to provision an instance with one virtual machine, but an instance is not synonymous with one virtual machine. They often will only contain one, but there are plenty of reasons that you would deploy an instance with multiple virtual machines and manage them together as one logical unit. For example, if you had a set of Apache web servers as a group, they could be managed as one single instance. They're all serving the same purpose. Or if maybe you create a SQL always on cluster, you could have the active and the passive all configured there in the same instance. So a couple of settings I'm going to run through. I've only got access to one group, so I'm going to commit this provisioning activity via that group that I'm assigned to. I'm going to select the cloud, and again, there's only one VME cluster in this environment, so it's via this cloud. I'll call it ABC webinar, so we'll go right to the top, or hopefully it'll go to the top because it's alphabetical in the instance list. I can give it a tag. So again, this means another user at a glance would be able to see the priority level of this virtual machine. It doesn't really affect anything on the back end. It's just for reporting purposes or potentially for use within scripts. But I can set this right up now as a test. And just like you can in other hypervisors, I could add some labels. And that, again, helps me for reporting. I can run reports against certain virtual machines or instances tagged with a certain value. Next, we're on to configuring. And the administrator that rules this environment has decided that we're using the plan concept. And I like plans. Okay, plans give standardization and they stop a user potentially running away and creating, an 128 gig virtual machine with 32 CPUs, and instead using a standardized format that I've created for them, or the administrators created for us to use. So I'll pick 1 vCPU and 2 gigs of memory. And I'll also add that this can be disabled. If you want people to do custom, they can. I'll select the resource pool, which is a common term that we use to decide a cluster. So again, I've got one cluster to choose from and I can pick that. It's automatically created or think of it as a vdisk, but a local disk for this VM inside the instance. And pretty poor to see on my screen, but there is a plus sign here where I could add additional disks of additional sizes, if I choose to. I can select the network that, again, the administrator has allowed me to see. Based on my access privileges, I can see and create virtual machines and attach them to these networks. But if I maybe had a test and dev role, I'll see different networks as somebody that operates exclusively with production. A comment I got asked the last time I presented this was, what does the networking recommendations look like on the physical server? And we do recommend that 6 ports is the optimal configuration. And that's if you're attaching to iSCSI or fiber channel based storage. You can have 1 port for fabric A, 1 port for fabric B, or if it's iSCSI and they're all Ethernet and none of them are HPAs, then you could have 1 port for iSCSI 1, 1 port for iSCSI 2, 2 ports for production and 2 for management. But if you've only got 4 ports and it's all Ethernet, then you could just do 2 for management and production and trunk them, and then another for iSCSI 1, iSCSI 2. Images, really interesting here. So I'm going to pick the Debian 12 image, and this is being fetched from the repository that has been associated with my VME manager. And those, again, can be created and uploaded by users with the correct permissions and shared amongst the team. I'm going to pick a host. I'll pick VME1. But if I didn't pick a host, it would take a look at the cluster's resource utilization and pick the best fitting host. For those of you that are interested, I'd also like to highlight that the storage that we're using is ElectraMP, and that is attached over iSCSI. So that's mission critical storage using iSCSI. Its volumes formatted with GFS2, and then we're just creating QCOW2 disks inside of that GFS2 file system. But it could have been NFS too. I'm going to leave create a user ticked. So based on my user profile, it's going to create on this virtual machine another account so I can log into it, though that would also be the admin account. And then from an options perspective, if I was doing like an Apache web server deployment, I could take this opportunity to say I want 2, 3, 4, 5 VMs in this instance. And I can do that just by changing that number, as well as a bunch of other settings, some of which I can't see if they were already defined in the template. But if I was doing a complete raw install, then I'd have those options available. So I'll click next. And again, in the mindset of what do I stand to gain here, from our script repository, being a Debian host, I could deploy a batch script. So the second, a bash script. So the second this is deployed, it would go on and it would deploy a script post boot to turn it from just a Debian OS all the way into a business function, an Apache web server. But I won't do that right now. And then backups, right? In the time that I was waiting in the lobby, there were 2 questions on backups, okay? Sorry, I popped that away. So it is a commonly asked question. And I think as HPE, we haven't done a fantastic job of communicating what this can and can't support in the market. So out of the box, free of charge, at no additional cost, there is basic backup functionality built in to the VME offering. You can create snapshots of your instances, and you can also create full copies and send them to S3 buckets or NFS shares, so you have an off copy version of that instance safely stored on some different media. Okay, and that's available in the box. Then people ask me about, well, what about Veeam? What about Commvault? And as 2 of our longest standing ISV partners, they are squirreling away at getting certification to do, VMware-esque, Hyper-V-esque backups by just integrating with the hypervisor. But Rome wasn't built in a day. And today, the way that those workflows can be maintained is through the installation of agents. So when you create this virtual machine, if you install the Veeam agent, you can continue to back it up. Okay, so I'm going to leave that as default. And if I wanted to here, I could also spin up multiple instances. So not just multiplying the VMs in the instance, but multiplying the instances themselves. But I'll leave it as 1. And we're off to the races. Now, I can see it here. It's gone right to the top because it's filtered by the name as default. This is a customizable view, so not just in the sense of filtering, but if I wanted to see more information at a glance for all of my instances, like what group provisioned them, what do they belong to, which cluster, I can just tick that and add that information to the view, no problem. So green for good, rocket ship for building. If I go into this instance, I can see the virtual machine, this is the progress bar of the single virtual machine, and how it's getting on. We haven't mastered the perfectly timed loading bar yet, so you may get to 10 and then suddenly finish. But if you wanted deeper detail on where it was up to, then you can click the history tab on the instance, and you can see by expanding the arrow all of the steps that have already been completed. So it's prepared the resource, it's configured, it's deployed the VM, it's now booting up, it's waiting to be allocated an IP from the IP pool that's associated with that VLAN that I gave it, and then it's finished. Okay, and immediately, I would have console access to this using my guest account that it created on boot. So if I did an ls -l, I can see there's no files, but if I did a file creation for the webinar, yeah, you can see that I can work from this. I can pop it out and I can use it in a separate tab. And if this was a Windows virtual machine and I was playing a video, I would even be able to hear sound coming through. So it's again, pretty good functionality. So seeing a summary of this virtual machine, I can see that I provisioned it with 2 GB of memory. Whoops, it needed a bit more than that. My mistake. So one of the things that you can do is, again, this is more OS dependent than it is product dependent, but you can sometimes change live the plan that you selected. So in this case, I can't, and it's warning me that it's going to need to reboot, but I can make this a 1 CPU to 4 GB virtual machine just by issuing it here. And if we think about vMotion, so let's say we deploy this to fill a gap, and then the storage comes later. How do you do that move between systems if you're maintaining the servers? Well, I could select here a different data store, or NFS share, and do what the equivalent of a storage vMotion. I could add additional networks that I forgot, or include additional disks. What you do on day one isn't what you confined by. So I'll click reconfigure, and it's warning me, which again is nice. So you couldn't fat finger this by mistake or miss that red, that it's going to need to restart. But I'm okay with that. It can. And once again, on the history, you can see this new event. So it's being shut down. It's going to be reconfigured, and you'll see 1 vCPU, 2 GB of memory go to 4. Hang it on that 1 second. Brilliant, and that's good, and it's up and running, and it's now 4 GB. Another action that I could complete is I could create a snapshot. So store this locally with the instance. That would mean if the instance went away, I'd have the snapshot, but if the whole thing went away, the box maybe that it's stored on, I wouldn't have an ability to recover. But I'll just create a quick snapshot here. And again, you can see these tasks run. So that's completed already there. So I could immediately now restore this virtual machine in place to where it was when I ran that backup. One more thing that I'll show you in this menu is the ability to run tasks. So right now, if I go to the summary and look at the IP that this has been given, take it and put it in my local web browser, it's going to return a fat lot of nothing. Okay, it's just a Debian instance. But if I go to run tasks and fetch one of the bash scripts that's stalled in the automation library, click execute, and this would execute across all of the VMs if there was more than one. In a few seconds, I'll be able to convert this into an Apache web server, which, because I'm on the local network, will mean I'll be able to show you what we've configured it to present. via the script. So that's finished. I could have watched that happen on the console as well if I wanted to. And there you go. So yeah, this whole lab environment is courtesy of the Geneva CIC. They've done a great job at setting it up, and that's a little bit of shameless self-promotion, I think. Okay. So moving on, another common question I get asked about is, vSphere HA or DRS equivalents. So if I were to go to the cluster, and you may have seen earlier on at the beginning that there is also VMware as a provisioning target. That VMware cluster will not appear in the clusters section because this is strictly for what we're managing, not what we're provisioning to or monitoring. And we are managing the VME cluster here. This is its vCenter. So this won't completely remove vCenter. You'll still need to go there to do your vSphere lifecycle management. But you can still have one holistic experience while you maintain two or traverse between the two different hypervisors. So if I click on this cluster, if I find the virtual machine that I created earlier, ABC webinar, I can take a quick note that this is deployed on VME 1, but maybe for licensing reasons, availability reasons, test and dev reasons, I don't want it there. Okay, well, I have the capability to manage its placement. Now, automatically, it will just try and spread workloads evenly across all available resource. But if I want to override that, I have a couple of options. I can say, VME2, move to this host and live there unless the host goes offline. Then you are free to fail over. I don't want you to not continue service. Or I can say, go there, and even if the host goes offline, you go offline. Okay. So I'll set it to failover and VME2. It's on VME1, but I'll click save. And if I went back to the instance and looked at its history, you'd see this action being committed. But in a few seconds, I think the screen actually refreshes every 5, so it might not get the first, but it's got the second, and it's now on VME2. Okay, so that's very cool in my opinion. While I'm in infrastructures, I'll show you a couple of additional tabs. So clouds, again, that logical construct that you can use to define access to resources. Clusters today is for VME, but as Shannon mentioned, visibility within this console can reach all areas of your data center. If you've got Nutanix or you've got an Azure local deployment, going to the full Morpheus data platform would give you visibility in these tabs of all of those different offerings. A compute is a list of servers that form the compute instances that we can deploy to. Network, I can quickly show you the IP pools that I talked about earlier. So I provisioned my instance against this pool. So I took a couple of the resources, but if I delete it, it would be relinquished and put back into the pool. If you want to integrate with an external IPAM, then we do have support for external DNS and IPAM offerings such as SolarWinds, BlueCat, DNS. Storage is where you get to see all of the things that are storage related. So in this case, I've got a generic S3 bucket configured, and I can use that for many purposes. I can use it to store my backups, or I could use it to host all of my virtual machine images, templates, ISOs, QCOW2 images, etc. File shares in this environment, I haven't got any configured. I've got a list here of all of the disks associated with all of the VMs in the environment. I've got the data store view, which again spans the VMware environment and VME. So that's a good view too. But let me show you what it looks like and the subtle differences between provisioning a VME instance and an instance in VMware. So again, with my role, with my privileges, I can also provision to the VMware environment. So I select it here. For the group, again, one group to provision from, so I leave it as standard, cloud as standard. Though I would note that if you had a vCenter that managed multiple clusters and for whatever reason, you didn't want every cluster to be visible, inside of the VME manager, that's okay too. You can scope the resource pools that we actually have the ability to provision to. That's fine. So we'll call this ABC VMware Web. Environment, I'll say this is dev. Again, can append labels, I won't. Plan sizes, again, this is where we're setting the standardization across multiple environments, regardless of hypervisor. Leave the plan at 1 CPU, 2 gig. Add additional vDisks, select the data store or leave it to auto. The networks are going to differ because, again, the compute hosts I'm provisioning to are different. I'll pick this one. Images. So interestingly, when you're provisioning to a VMware environment, it's going to call on 2 different content sources. It's going to use the local vCenter content library, as well as the virtual machine images that we've got stored in the VME manager, either locally or on NFS share or S3. So here I'd see maybe some OVFs or OVA templates, stuff that wouldn't work on VME, that is a possible deployment method for this virtual machine. So I could just pick another Debian instance. To be fair, I can select the host. That environment's got 1. I can even use folders, and then the other settings are very similar. Create user, advanced, and this could have both VM tools as well as the Morpheus agent installed to collect detailed logs, performance stats, and more. Again, I can call upon different scripts, PowerShell, Bash, whatever, from the automation library, configure snapshots. And again, I touched on it earlier, but it's just come to my mind again now. If we wanted to, because it's done in full fat Morpheus, we could integrate Veeam, Commvault, Cohesity, whoever is willing to work with this hypervisor in this process as well. So keep it really streamlined, but that's forward looking. And done. Okay. And then you can see that booting and get a lot of the similar stats and feel as before. It will take a little bit longer to provision, but here are the stats that we're getting from the tools live, being updated, I think, every 5 seconds. Again, you could be quite granular with the intervals that they're collected, but the screen will update every 5. And it's already been given an IP address. Oh, no, that's the host, but it will be given an IP address too. I get more detail on this instance, how many virtual machines make up the instance, what storage it's using on the VMware cluster, what network it's provisioned and how chatty it is, backups configured, history just like with VME, and console access too. So you don't have to go to vCenter and pop out a view there. You can see it working along. So I talked about creating a web server earlier. I've still got this running here. I don't have the edit credentials to add additional bash scripts here, or PowerShell scripts to this environment, but an administrator that does would have a button here that they could click, and then from their local desktop, they could just drag and drop different scripts that could be called upon by different users. Same again for the virtual image store. You can see all of the different types that you could upload here. So you've got ISOs, QCal2, VHD, VMware, OVF, OVAs. As default, these are going to be stored on the local storage assigned to the VME manager. That's not really best practice. You should find, again, generic S3 as your AWS storage so that you can store more images off its local storage on a resilient platform or a larger platform. Okay. Tools, pretty cool. I like to think of this as the collaboration section. So if I wanted to, for example, not write a password on a sticky note or put it in an email and send it to a colleague, I can have VME create me a password via a cipher so that then it could be shared in a secure encrypted format. So if I put in, I want a password and I want to have 10 characters, and as a reminder, this is going to be for a Windows host. I can set a lease time for it to expire, but I won't. I'll click save, decrypt, and you can see the password that it's generated. So again, this is encouraging secure collaboration. Archives, another interesting area. So that script that I used earlier was calling upon a file, which if I click, it will offer me the option to download, that is stored inside this archive. So this is S3 backed. There's 2 links for downloading, but there is potentially up to 3 options. There's private, which requires an approved login. Public, anybody, and temp, which is anybody's but only for a certain amount of time. You can see who's accessing this file, which scripts are how to embed this into a script so you can call this file. And if I click the public link here, it will download that image. Okay, so other sections to discuss. Administrator. So again, with administrative privileges, I'd be able to edit plans here. I could even set up a plan that is fully customizable, so users can put in the CPU and memory that they want, or I can try and maintain some order and some consistency, and have these plans readily accessible, readily consumable. I'm not going to go through each one here, but I'm going to flash up all of the different settings that can be, or decisions that can be made when defining a role's access. So access to the VME appliance, executing scripts via the API, using the backup functionality, creating clouds. As you can see, I've only got read, creating clusters is read, editing the library read, but you can be very granular on what somebody can and can't do, which is refreshing, it's secure. I can see a list of users that share the role, the health of the system, and also some settings, but I don't have access to do much beyond creating an additional environment tag. So that's what I've been scoped to see. The global search will let you find a virtual machine if you didn't know where to easily locate it. And you can open up the user documents by just clicking the support drop down. So if you wanted help with, I don't know, understanding what a cipher is, opening a support case, or using the API, the lib-based API, then you can do all of that here as well. One other thing or final thing to show. So I said earlier, when I wanted to create a virtual machine, I wanted it to create a local user account for myself. What it creates is set here. So every Linux machine is going to be created with this username and that password if I leave the setting ticked. And if I choose to, I can enable for my account 2FA. Okay, so I'm not going to be blamed if somebody stole the credentials, accessed my account, and did something naughty. I could have prevented that happening by enabling 2FA. Shannon, I'm just about where I wanted to be with topics. Are there any questions that we could answer now, or do you want me to hand it back over?
Yeah, there's quite a number of questions in the chat, so I'm just answering some as I can. One question we've got, Sam, is can we put the host in maintenance mode for BIOS updates?
Yes. Yeah. So again, unfortunately, my credentials are more limited than I would like in this environment, but yeah, you could stop a host, virtual machines evacuate, and then perform whatever maintenance activity that you need. Again, not to look into the future, but with integration with PCBE, when it comes to updating the full stack, so the array with the operating system and VME package on top, we're hoping to orchestrate that process, right? And to do that, you're going to need to be able to move virtual machines around a group non-disruptively. Perfect.
Thank you. I'm just trying to see how many questions I've not been able to answer just yet. So do we have a snapshot feature to have instant backup before performing any change request?
Before performing any change request. So there is an instant snapshot feature. I showed that for VME, where I took a snapshot of that instance and all of its virtual machines. I'm not quite sure the tail end of that question. But yes, there is a snapshot feature built into VME.
Perfect. Thank you, Sam. We have got a question. How many physical machines are supported per cluster?
So we are currently testing the maximum number of, unless Shannon, you heard later news than me, but the last time I asked, we were in the process of qualifying exactly how many physical hosts that we would support under one VME manager. So what I'll do is I will take that one away, and then for all attendees, we'll respond back with if that number's been defined yet. But if you have any other questions and want to check in again on that, then my email is drapers@hpe.com, and you can just drop me an email, and I'll go on the hunt for the answer again.
Yeah, I think as well on top of that, what we had validated, the last I had heard was around 12, but that's not to say that that is the maximum number. That's just what we have validated today, and obviously we'll be continuing to enhance the amount of physical hosts within a cluster as well. There is another question, Sam, as well. How do we add physical servers in VME console? Now, I don't know whether you'll be able to do it from your with the credentials, but if you could showcase I think in the infrastructure tab.
Yeah. So, if I could take a minute, I think there is a lab I've got access to where the button exists when I go into the cluster that lets me add an additional host. Essentially, you would just need to give the VME manager the login credentials, username, password, SSH, IP, and then it can go off and add that host into the existing cluster. For cluster sizes, though I know that wasn't the question asked, for iSCSI based deployments, we have a minimum node count of 3. But for NFS, which would be more of a test and dev implementation, we could just have 1. But let me stop sharing and see if I can get access to an environment that I can do that in.
No problem, Sam. Whilst you're doing that, I'll just bring back up the Q&A slide as well on my side. We did have a question about migration of a VM or host from VMware to VME, whether it would be shown on the webinar today. So as mentioned previously, it needs to be, virtual machine. The host, obviously, they use different operating systems. Ubuntu and 22.04 is the version that we're using today. And obviously, VMware uses ESXi, so it'd be on a kind of per VM basis as well. I don't think we can show it in the tool today, can we, Sam? But it does an image conversion. I'll let you go with that one.
Yeah, so the image conversion today is potentially mixing up my releases here. It wasn't available in the December version, but we were trying to ramp in the local UI the image conversion feature. Right now, you would just rely on native features like Qemu has like an IMG image converter that you can use. But yeah, I think it was discussed on another webinar. We are in sort of the 8.0.4 or whatever it ends up being, adding the functionality in the UI to convert images, so you can move virtual machines between 2 different hypervisors.
Perfect. Thank you, Sam. I'm just replying to some questions in the chat as well at the same time. So somebody asked, is everything in the cloud? This is an on-premise console as well. So very similar to vCenter today. This is an on-premise console, so no cloud capabilities required as well. Does VME support containers? The Morpheus platform ops supports containers today.
Yeah.
Just trying to see if I've not answered any. Oh, there's quite a lot of questions actually that I've. Oh gosh. Okay. Windows VM functionality and support, Sam?
Yes. So with the right drivers, you can run Windows-based virtual machines on VME. We are working on a full list of validated operating systems, but again, these things take time. Today, we're more reliant on community certified or community experience where they are running on KVM, Windows-based virtual machines, or different operating systems. But yes, they're again not shown in the demo. There's the ability to install the correct drivers so you can run Windows-based virtual machines on KVM hypervisor.
Perfect. There's also an exhaustive list of operating systems that we will support for virtual images as well. So all of the different Windows, Oracle, Debian, Rocky Linux, that continued as well. So a wide range there. Are there agents involved on the virtual machines like VMware has VMware tools? There is, yes. And
there's a Morpheus agent, yeah.
Yeah. Correct, and that can help with performance of the virtual machines as well. Somebody asked as well, I'm looking to automate the VM provisioning using out-of-box tools like IaaC or Ansible using wrap script.
There is integration with Ansible scripts, not an area I've worked with myself, but I'm sure if there is documentation, we can fetch that after and share that with the group.
Perfect. Thank you, Sam. When is it possible array-based snapshot backup?
So yeah, again, there is a scope of work specifically with Electra MP B10000 where we want to enable snapshot integration, easy volume provisioning, so ordering the virtual machine if you wanted to do it in a data store style, ordering that volume on the array, formatting it with GFS2, and then being able to use it by the virtual machines, as well as a vvols style of virtual machine management with integrations on Electra MP B10000. Inside of that scope of work is the snapshot integration. So not there today, but coming for specific hardware platforms. Yeah.
Thank you. Another question is there a tool to migrate VMs from a VMware environment? So today, there is an image conversion tool within the VME console that customers can use to migrate the virtual machines from VMware. We will also have our Zerto functionality that we'll be able to support in migrations once Zerto validation has been done with VM Essentials later on this year as well. I think, Sam, you already covered the minimum number of physical servers required to form the cluster. That is free today as well.
Yeah.
For iSCSI.
A couple of other questions I can see. So can you deploy OVF? I guess that means OVF files. So yeah, to a VMware environment, but not to a VME cluster. But if you were managing a VMware cluster, then yes, you could fetch those either from the library that's maintained by the VME manager, or you could fetch them from vCenter's content library. I might have missed this, sorry. Was there support for FCSAN or yeah? So the hypervisor can support lots of different storage types: iSCSI, NFS, fiber channel, and even HCI-based storage. Today we validated iSCSI on the Electra MPB 10K 6000 and 5000. You're not limited to that group of arrays, but that is what has been working in a lab and something that if you called to log a support ticket against, we would know we'd be able to get working.
Perfect. We've had one around pricing and in our configuration tool, OCA. It is available to quote via OCA now from a standalone perspective. And then from an integrated PCB perspective, that will come early April timeframe as well to begin quoting and pricing for that. We've covered the migration question and the third-party plugins. So later on in 2025, we'll see integrations with third-party, such as Pure Storage, as the example in the question there. Is there some integration?
Well, Oh, sorry. Well, yeah, I was going to say, I mean, that answer is twofold, right? Asking about third-party vendors, they've got to be also willing to work with us. And if they reach out, then I'm sure we'd be happy to. But echo a comment earlier. You know, we are putting all of our engineering resource first in supporting what the HPE customers buy, which is HPE storage, HPE servers. But yeah, we absolutely plan to increase the reach. Yeah.
Perfect.
So will be a disaster recovery over VM? Yeah, so that will be Zerto when that's qualified. So, you know, the leg up we have on SRM is features such as ransomware detection, as well as the ability to do recovery points measured in seconds and recovery times measured in minutes. So we're on ramp to support a Zerto-based version, either tail end of this year, start of next year. Yeah.
Try to see if there's any questions that we've missed. So
There's a question about RDMs for virtual machines. I'll have to take that one away, but that is a good question.
Perfect. Things like Citrix, VDI, validation for those is on the roadmap as well. So absolutely, kind of third-party integrations are all on the roadmap to be supported as well. Can the VM drives be thin provisioned?
The VM drives are thin provisioned.
Thank you. I think that's most of the questions that we have covered. If there are any additional questions, as Sam mentioned, I think I've just got one more as I was coming in. Oh no, we've covered that. If there are any additional questions that you do have, please reach out to either myself or Sam directly. We'll be following up with the content from today with an email, or work with your aligned HP account team or your channel partners who are also able to support on VM Essentials as well. But thank you so much, everybody, for joining us today. We hope you found. Oh, sorry, one last one. Since I've come through. Does VME USB pass through?
VME. I don't know if it's. I mean, we do CD-ROM. I don't know if we do USB. Let me take it away.
Perfect. We will come back to some of the questions that we weren't able to answer today. But thank you so much, everybody, for joining us. We hope it was a valuable use of your time, and look forward to further conversations. Thank you so much for your time today. Take care.